Welcome back. Pull up a chair, grab a coffee, and let's just have an honest conversation today. Because I need to ask you something. What does the absolute peak of the mountain look like to you? If you turn on CNBC or open up any mainstream financial media right now, they will sell you a very specific, heavily packaged dream. They tell you that the ultimate goal of investing is to escape, to finally hit that magic number in your portfolio so you can pack up your desk, give your boss the middle finger, and spend the next 40 years sipping overly sweet margaritas on a beach somewhere. On the surface, that sounds incredible, right? The economy is supposedly booming, unemployment is low, and the stock market keeps hitting all-time highs. Everything looks pristine. But I'm going to let you in on a little secret today. Underneath that shiny media packaged surface, there is a massive psychological crisis brewing that nobody on Wall Street wants to talk about. The people who actually win this game, the ones who beat the market, beat the system, and reach the absolute pinnacle of wealth, they don't leave. If mainstream financial advice were a Tinder date, it would be the guy who calls himself a visionary tech entrepreneur, but really he's just selling solar panels door to door. It's a beautifully crafted illusion. So today, we're going to do an exercise. I want you to step into a completely different point of view. You have reached ultimate financial independence. Imagine this. It's a Tuesday morning. You're sitting in a high-rise office overlooking the city. Your carried interest across 4 different investment strategies has just hit your accounts, officially making you financially independent. You log into your banking portal, and there it is, the number. Meaning, the number in your account dictates you never have to work a single day again in your life. You sit at your desk with completely empty hands. You realize with absolute certainty that you could just stop. You could walk out the glass doors right now. And then you deliberately reach back for the keyboard. Why? Because you have become the architecture itself. Today, we are going to break down exactly how you got into this chair, how the global financial machine actually operates behind closed doors, and why true financial freedom is the greatest paradox of our generation. Let's dive in. To understand why you just reached back for that keyboard, we have to rewind the tape. We have to look at how you got here. You see, you weren't born with a silver spoon, and you definitely weren't one of those golden child Ivy League prodigies who walked into a hedge fund on day one. For years, you were just the overlooked risk analyst. You were the person sitting in the windowless room on the 4th floor, crunching the boring numbers while the managing directors took all the credit. But while you were down there in the trenches, you started noticing things. You started seeing the cracks in the foundation that everyone else was too busy celebrating to notice. You realized that the global financial system isn't some pristine, elegant science. It's an absurd, completely debt-fueled casino. Think back to the historical context for a second. While the guys upstairs were popping champagne over quarterly earnings, you were studying the past. You were looking back at the 1973 Nifty 50 bubble. Back then, institutional investors were obsessed with 50 large-cap stocks, companies like IBM and Polaroid, believing they were one-decision stocks that you could just buy and hold forever regardless of the valuation. And what happened? The bubble popped, and valuations got crushed. You looked at the tech stocks of today and saw the exact same hubris. You studied Japan's lost decades in the 1990s. You watched how a massive asset bubble fueled by easy credit and speculative mania completely collapsed, leading to years of economic stagnation and forcing the central bank to intervene in unprecedented ways. You understood global liquidity because you saw what happens when a country's financial engine floods and stalls out. And of course, you saw the 2008 financial crisis. You watched the world almost end because of toxic mortgages packaged as AAA investments. But more importantly, you saw what grew out of the ashes of 2008. When the traditional banks pulled back on lending because of new regulations, you saw the rise of private credit. You realized that the real money wasn't in trading public stocks anymore. It was in the shadows. It was in massive, unregulated loans negotiated behind closed doors. Because you understood all of this, because you saw the actual mechanics of the market, you got tapped on the shoulder You were recruited to a legendary shadow fund. Not a public bank, not a flashy Wall Street firm you see on the news, but a deeply private, heavily insulated fund that pulls the invisible strings of the economy. So now you're inside the shadow fund. The environment is entirely different here. You aren't dealing with everyday retail investors. You are light years away from the Discord degenerates and the 0 days to expiration options traders who are out there literally losing their entire life savings gambling on random meme coins. You also aren't surrounded by the stereotypical finance bros you see on social media. The guys pacing around in Patagonia vests, aggressively packing Zyn pouches into their upper lips, and screaming about the latest crypto project. By the way, if we're being honest, most of those crypto projects are essentially brilliant scams, and you figured that out a long time ago. No, your world is quiet. It is cold, calculating, and incredibly complex. To understand your new reality, let's break down the mechanics using a simple story. Let's use a fictional character. Let's meet Bob. Bob is a traditional investor. Bob wakes up, watches the news, checks his retirement portfolio, and he thinks he understands how the economy works. Bob thinks the stock market goes up because companies are doing well. But you know that Bob is completely blind to the actual mechanisms driving his portfolio. You know that Bob's entire financial well-being is resting on a knife's edge of obscure policies like yield curve control and the yen carry trade. Let's break down that yen carry trade, for example, because this is the kind of stuff you orchestrate every single day. The Bank of Japan decides to keep their interest rates essentially at zero or even negative for decades to fight off their economic stagnation. So what do you do with the shadow fund? You borrow massive amounts of Japanese yen because it costs you basically nothing. It's free money. Then you take that cheap yen, convert it into US dollars, and buy high-yielding American assets like tech stocks or US Treasury bonds. You are pocketing the difference. It works flawlessly until it doesn't. Because if the yen suddenly strengthens or if Japanese interest rates tick up even a fraction of a percent, that entire multi-trillion-dollar house of cards starts to violently unwind. The everyday retail investor has no idea this is happening. They just see the stock market inexplicably drop 1,000 points on a random Tuesday and panic. But you orchestrate macro trades that move global currencies. You are the one driving the volatility. You see, the system relies on this complexity. It relies on the fact that these financial mechanisms are often so boring and dense that the average person tunes them out. But you took those complex, boring concepts like government deficit spending and realized they are the key to everything. Speaking of government deficit spending, it's honestly hilarious when you look at the raw numbers. The way the government spends money right now is exactly like a guy going through a massive midlife crisis. He's maxing out 5 different credit cards to buy a shiny red sports car he can't afford, completely ignoring the fact that his mortgage is 3 months past due, all just to keep up appearances for the neighbors. That's our current fiscal policy in a nutshell. But in your new role at the shadow fund, you don't judge the midlife crisis, you simply find a way to monetize it. You grow to manage billions. You take all of this debt, the good, the bad, and the very, very ugly, and you organize it into manageable buckets. You exploit the inefficiencies. You become an absolute titan in the world of macroeconomics. And that is how you finally hit the number. That is how your carried interest across your private credit, currency, and macro strategies finally crests the peak, putting you in that chair, staring at a bank account that guarantees you ultimate financial independence. Now, orchestrating multi-billion-dollar macro trades and exposing the hidden scams of the financial markets requires an unbelievable amount of secure private research. When you're operating at that level, dealing with proprietary data that can literally move global currencies, you cannot afford to have your digital footprint exposed. And look, even if you aren't managing a shadow fund, if you're just an everyday retail investor trying to navigate this chaotic, rigged system without getting taken advantage of, your data privacy is your absolute first line of defense. Whether I'm deep diving into historical charts of Japan's lost decades, or just trying to securely access my own banking portals on public Wi-Fi at a coffee shop, I click one button and I know my connection is locked down. They have thousands of servers globally. meaning you get lightning-fast speeds without sacrificing an ounce of security. If you want to protect yourself from the digital surveillance that is absolutely rampant in today's economy, take control of your data, secure your digital life today so you can focus on navigating the markets safely. Now let's get back to the uncomfortable truth about what happens when you finally beat that market. All right, we are back. You're sitting in the chair, you've protected your assets, you've made the billions, you've successfully navigated the scams, the meme coins, the predatory trading firms, and the macroeconomic chaos. So why don't you get up and leave? This is the climax of our story, and it's the uncomfortable truth that nobody in the traditional financial media will ever admit to you. They tell you that money buys freedom, but what they don't tell you is about the paradox of financial freedom. The money buys you out of the rat race, yes, but the system's gravity traps you inside an architecture you no longer bring yourself to leave. Let me explain this by introducing you to a deep economic theory. Have you ever heard of Goodhart's Law? Goodhart's Law states that when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. Think about that in the context of your own life. For years, as that overlooked risk analyst, money was simply a measure of your freedom. It was a tool. The goal was to hit a certain number so you could finally be free from the stress, free from the grind of the absurdity of the Wall Street casino. But somewhere along the way, as you climbed the ranks of the shadow fund and started managing billions, the money stopped being a measure of freedom. It became the target itself. And once the money became the ultimate target, it stopped buying you freedom. It only bought you deeper participation in the game. You see, the system is completely broken. Just accept it. The stock market, the credit markets, the currency exchanges, they are all fundamentally rigged, functioning entirely on a bizarre mixture of immense leverage and collective delusion. You know this better than anyone because you're the one pulling the levers. When you sit at your desk and look at your empty hands, you realize that if you leave, you lose your connection to the pulse of the world. You aren't just trading numbers on a screen anymore. You are dictating reality. When you orchestrate a massive trade against a vulnerable currency, real-world supply chains shift. When you open the floodgates on a private credit strategy, entire industries are either funded or starved. You have spent your entire adult life learning to read the matrix. You can see the hidden truth behind every economic headline. When the news says why the oil crisis is secretly good, you know exactly who is profiting from that engineered narrative. You know that the mainstream media is telling people to look at the flashy AI bubbles, but you know that's just a misdirection. The real deadly threat is hiding in the boring, unregulated corners of the debt market. You are the watchdog, but you are also the wolf. And that is the incredible, suffocating gravity of the situation. You can't just go sit on a beach and drink margaritas, because you know that the beach you're sitting on is financed by a fragile web of collateralized debt obligations that could evaporate overnight. You can't just check out, because your brain is now permanently hardwired to see the systemic flaws. If you walk away, you become just like Bob. You become a passenger on a bus driven by people who don't understand the brakes are failing. By staying, by reaching your hands back onto that keyboard, you retain the one thing that is actually more addictive than the money: control. You have become the architecture itself. The system cannot exist without people like you constantly managing the pressure valves, constantly hedging the risks, constantly exploiting the inefficiencies to keep the global liquidity flowing. You bought your way out of the rat race, only to discover that you are now the one running the maze. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with a terrifying realization. The people running the global financial system aren't doing it because they need another yacht. They are literally cannot stop. They are captured by their own creation. The global economy is hurtling forward, fueled by record government deficits, speculative manias, and massive opaque shadow funds moving billions of dollars in the dark. The system isn't headed for a soft landing. It is headed for severe, unprecedented turbulence. And the people at the top, the ones with ultimate financial independence, aren't jumping out with parachutes. They are gripping the steering wheel tighter because they are terrified of what happens if they let go. I want you to really think about this, because it changes everything about how you should view your own investments and your own goals. I have a question for you, and I want you to head down to the comments and let me know your honest thoughts on this. Do you think true financial freedom actually exists in a system built entirely on infinite debt? Or is ultimate independence just an illusion that forces you to become part of the machine? Let me know what you think down below. I read every single comment, and I genuinely want to know if you guys think this is a permanent shift in how our markets work, or if the whole thing is eventually going to snap. And listen, if you appreciate this kind of deep dive breakdown, if you are tired of the superficial, sugar-coated garbage that traditional financial media feeds you every single day, hit that subscribe button right now. The big networks like CNBC won't touch these topics because it completely ruins the narrative they are paid to sell you. We are going to keep shining a light on the rigged nature of Wall Street, exposing the scams, and breaking down the complex mechanics that actually drive your reality. Thanks for being here. Stay sharp, question everything the media tells you, and I'll see you in the next one.